I will tell you what I saw, because I was there for all of it, and because my brother never would. He is a private man, Edmund. The Duke of Velacourt, the Ironbound Duke, they called him in the county, and they did not mean it as a compliment. They meant the set of his jaw at the magistrate's bench. They meant the mills he shuttered when owners cheated workers' wages. They meant the way he could sit across a dinner table from a man he despised and say absolutely nothing and make the man sweat through his collar. I am his younger brother, Lord Callum Velacourt, and I have watched my brother clear rooms with a single look since we were boys. Even I did not see Miss Wren Ashby coming. I want to tell you what she was. First, before I tell you what they did with her, she was ward to a man named Harwick Grain, guardian by a distant cousin's will, a paper arrangement from when Wren was 11, and her father's debts had swallowed everything. Grain had 3 daughters who needed a governess, a library that needed cataloging, and correspondence that needed managing, and a household that ran because someone organized it. And that someone, for 9 years, was Wren Ashby. She was called a ward, which is a pleasanter word for the same arrangement when you wish to avoid the guilt of it. She had a small room, her meals at the family table, when company did not make it inconvenient, and her father's one remaining possession, a small leather volume of his botanical sketches, which she kept under her pillow and never showed anyone. Met her twice before the dinner at Greywood Hall, both times briefly. Both times she had the quality I can only describe as contained. Not cold, not shy, but gathered entirely into herself, as though she had decided the interior life was the only one she could trust. She was not plain. She was not beautiful in the way society tallies beauty. She had gray eyes that held their ground when you spoke to her, and a way of going still when something interested her, and hands that were always doing something useful, a mended cuff, a child's arithmetic book, a vase being quietly straightened. My brother Edmund had met her exactly once in the Grain drawing room while I watched from the doorway. He had said good evening. She had said good evening. That was the whole of it. But I had seen his eyes stay on her for 3 seconds longer than necessary after she left the room, and with Edmund, 3 seconds is a declaration. Now to the dinner. We were guests at Greywood Hall for a shooting party in January. 6 families, 22 people at the long table, candlelight and crystal and the smell of roasted pheasant. Wren served in the sense that she managed everything. She had placed every card, instructed every footman, approved every dish. She sat at the far end of the table with Grain's youngest daughter and ate without drawing attention. To herself, which I imagine she had spent 9 years perfecting. Harwick Grain rose for the dessert course. He was a man who enjoyed announcements. He liked the heft of other people's attention. He raised his glass and smiled in the way that men smile when they believe themselves generous, and have not examined the matter closely enough to discover they are not. He said that arrangements had at long last been made for Miss Ashby. She had been a wonderful help to the family, and it was only right that her future be secured. He said that Mr. Aldous Creft, here he nodded toward an elderly gentleman near the head of the table, heavy-set, red-cheeked, a widower twice over, had been so good as to offer a solution satisfying all parties. The girl had served her purpose at Greywood. She would go where she was most useful. He said this last part lightly. The way you say the most terrible things when you have forgotten, they are terrible. 22 people absorbed it. A few of the women exchanged glances. Kreft nodded with proprietorial satisfaction. The Grain daughters did not look toward the far end of the table. I looked. Wren had set down her spoon. She held the edge of the table with both hands, pressed flat against the cloth, and she looked at the candles in the center of the table. Not at Grain, not at Kreft, not at any of us. Her face did not change. Only her hands, which had gone white at the knuckles, gave her away, and only if you were watching for it. My brother was watching for it. Edmund stood up. He did not rise slowly and pointedly the way men do when they want the room to know they are rising. He simply stood, and the room went quiet the way it always does when Edmund stands. Because the room has always understood that when the Duke of Velacourt is on his feet, something is being decided, he said. That arrangement will not proceed, Grain blinked. I beg your pardon? Miss Ashby, Edmund said, and his voice was level and entirely without heat, which was somehow more effective than rage, is not a ledger item to be transferred. She will not be dispatched to settle anyone's accounts. He paused. She is under my protection from this evening. I will have my solicitor speak with yours in the morning. The room was perfectly silent. Kreft's red face went a shade redder, and then a shade paler. Grain opened his mouth and found nothing in it. The Grain daughters stared at the tablecloth. I sat very still and did not permit myself to smile, because Edmund would have seen it, and he would never have forgiven me. Wren looked up from the candles. She looked at my brother across the length of that long table. across the silver and the crystal and the appalled dinner guests, and for one moment, her face was entirely open, entirely unguarded, the way a face is when something happens that a person has not allowed themselves to hope for. Then she gathered herself back and gave a small, composed nod, as though thanking him for passing the salt. Edmund sat down and resumed his meal. He stayed at Greywood 3 more days on the pretense of the shooting party. He spent very little time shooting. He spent a great deal of time in the library, where Wren was cataloging a shelf of natural history volumes, and where I was, on one occasion, obliged to find a book on an entirely fictitious errand, and discovered them standing at a window, not touching, not speaking, watching the snow fall on the frozen kitchen garden with the absorbed silence of two people who have found, improbably, the one other person in the world who does not require them to perform. I withdrew very quietly. I have always been, when the occasion demands it, a thoughtful younger brother. A fortnight later, Edmund wrote to me from Velacourt. He wrote one paragraph about the estate accounts. He wrote 3 words at the bottom of the page: "Come at once." I came at once because with Edmund, 3 words are also a declaration. I arrived to find Wren already there. She had been brought, with a companion, under the protection he had promised, housed in the east guest rooms with her single trunk and her father's leather volume of botanical sketches. She was sitting in Velacourt's library, which is 4 times the size of Greywood's, with the look of a woman who has been set down in the middle of a cathedral after spending her life in a cupboard, and is trying very hard not to show how undone she is by it. Edmund asked her in the blue drawing room, alone, that evening. He told me afterward, in the spare way he tells me things, that he had said he was not a sentimental man, and she ought to know what she was taking on, and that he had said he had sat across more dinner tables than he could count in his life, and had never once found them worth attending, until he understood she had arranged this one and that other one, and that he had said if she could bear him, he would spend the rest of his days ensuring she was never again required to give a single thing she had not freely chosen to give. She told him she could bear him very well. They were married in March, quietly in the Velacourt chapel, with snow still on the ground and snowdrops coming up through it along the path. I stood beside my brother. He was not a man who showed emotion easily, but I had stood beside him at enough significant moments to read him, and I can tell you that when she walked toward him, in a gown the color of winter sky, her father's volume in her hands, her gray eyes holding his across the stone floor, Edmund, the Ironbound Duke of Velacourt, the man who had cleared 100 rooms without raising his voice, was holding himself very carefully together. Grain sent a letter. Edmund did not reply to it. Kreft went back to his own county and stayed there. And Wren, who had given 9 years of her life to a house that measured her worth in what she could provide, who had sat at the far end of every table, who had held the edge of a cloth with white-knuckled hands and looked at the candles because she had not permitted herself to look anywhere else. Wren walked through the front doors of Velacourt on a cold March morning as its Duchess, and she has not once been made to feel like a ledger item since. I was there for all of it, as I said. I have never told it better than that.